In November 2022, the World Cup will kick off in Qatar. But even before the first whistle is blown, it's already a World Cup of controversy.
In this video, we'll look at the massive construction programme undertaken by the Qatari government.
It's impressive, the big challenging project and also challenging architecture.
How it's achieved it.
Migrant workers are absolutely vital to the delivery of the World Cup.
And who's been hurt or even killed along the way.
Many talk about being missold a dream.
Perhaps the most grotesque example of sports washing and how the football is contributing to the violation of human rights and actually killing of people.
These are, men who have travelled across the world to provide for their families, and for them to die of so-called unknown causes and arrive home in a coffin really leaves these families in a dire situation.
We'll also look at the genuine progress that's been made on employment rights since Qatar was awarded the World Cup in 2010. And we'll look at the challenges still facing workers there.
That's all coming up on DW Business Beyond.
The World Cup is a pretty big deal. National teams from all four corners of the globe, bringing with them tens, if not hundreds of thousands of fans, not to mention the world's media, the medical staff, the sponsors.
When Qatar won the right to hold the 2022 competition, it was in no position to host them all. That's why it promised a vast construction programme like the world has rarely seen. Since then, it's been building 8 new stadiums. It's doubled the size of Doha's airport. It's built a brand new metro system for the capital, laid more than 1,000 kilometres of new highway, and is preparing tens of thousands of new hotel rooms.
There are all sorts of transport infrastructure upgrades and buildings that are taking place. Now, they're not officially part of the World Cup project, but of course they're intrinsically related, because without them, how would people travel?
The programme's been going very well. Many of the projects are either finished or ahead of schedule. So how have the Qataris done it? Well, 2 things: money and migrants.
For Qatar, the money part is easy. It's one of the top 10 wealthiest nations on earth because of its vast oil reserves.
But what it doesn't have vast reserves of is people.
The Qatari government is heavily reliant on workers from overseas. Economic migrants make up the vast majority of the people in Qatar. The country has over 2 million migrant workers, representing over 90% of the working population. The vast majority come from Asia and Africa, with the top 5 countries being India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Egypt and the Philippines.
The proportion of migrant workers in the population is not unusual in the Arab world. Places like the UAE, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia all rely heavily on workers from overseas to keep their economies going.
We experience in many areas of the world that we don't have enough workers, and that workers are migrating within the country, within Europe, for example, or from the whole Asia area to Qatar and other Arabian states.
In the case of Qatar, the extra attention in the run-up to the World Cup has shone a light on the treatment of its migrant workers, and plenty of people have not liked what they've seen.
Migrant workers, many of whom are low-paid migrant workers, are often housed in so-called labour camps. So these are kind of dormitory style accommodation where workers might be sharing a room with 6 to 8 other workers in bunk beds in incredibly cramped rooms.
Many talk about being missold a dream, where they're hired by recruitment agencies in the home countries, and in that recruitment to those agencies, they usually have to pay a high fee, and then they're taken to Qatar. So there the wages can be much lower than promised.
Much of the criticism of Qatar's employment practices over the past decade has centred around how it recruits workers.
Qatar and other Arab Gulf states developed a system called Kafala, meaning sponsorship, to bring in workers from around the world. Anyone who wants to work in Qatar needs to have a sponsor, a person or party based in Qatar. The sponsors use people in other countries like Bangladesh, for example, as agents. Their job is to travel around looking for workers. Once they find them, the agent takes money for a visa and the worker makes their way to Qatar, where they'll work for the sponsor. Kafala puts a lot of power in the hands of the sponsor. Because the workers' residency rights are tied to their employment contracts, the sponsor can stop them switching jobs, and the inability to change employer leaves workers open to exploitation. Some sponsors will even withhold their passports, preventing them from returning home.
However, in Qatar at least, Kafala is, in theory, no more. In 2020, the Qatari government introduced a new law that stops employers from being able to block their workers from changing jobs. It was one of a series of reforms that's been introduced by the Qatari government to employment law while the world has been watching.
Qatar has, for example, just introduced a minimum monthly wage for all workers, regardless of nationality. Employers now also have to provide food and board, or give workers extra to pay for their own. Something FIFA has been keen to flag up.
When it comes to the situation in Qatar, in particular, I think we need to be fair there as well and admit that a lot of progress has happened. A lot of progress in the conditions of the workers.
We have seen Qatar make some important reforms to the labour system in the last few years. But the implementation of these reforms means that the reality on the ground for many, many migrant workers remains incredibly harsh.
When you look to conditions, work conditions in Bangladesh, in India, those situations are not the best. People are really looking for work. Young people are looking for adventures as well. So this is a pretty good ground to make contracts which are not really fair or really decent.
So has the end of Kafala meant the end of mistreatment of workers in Qatar? Well, it's clear that some are still having a tough time.
Mohammed Akash is 25 years old and from Bangladesh. At the end of 2019, he travelled to Qatar with a promise of work.
সর্বপ্রথম আপনার গিয়া বিষয়তে আসনের পর যে নাকি দালাল হ্যাঁ আপনার গিয়া নেওয়ানের 2 দিন আগে দেশে পড়তে তখন আমি মনে করেন যে গেছি যাওয়ানোর পর বলতে যে হুনা আমার লোক দালালের লোক আছে হুনে বলে থাকনের লাগা পরে ওইখানে যাওয়ানোর পর মনে করেন যে কাজ কুছ পাই নাই বুঝছেন নি মানে আইডি দেন এই আকামাটা আছে না যে কার্ডটা ওই কার্ডটা পাই নাই 6-7 মাস পর কার্ডটা পাইছি আর যতদিন কার্ড পাই নাই ততদিন মনে করেন যে এই আপনার রাজমিস্ত্রির কাজ করছি
Akash needed the work. He says he spent the equivalent of more than $7,500 getting over to Qatar, money that he borrowed from his family. He says his dad's an auto rickshaw driver and could barely afford it.
মানে দালাল বলছিল যে আমি আপনি যান আমি 1 মাস পড়াইতেছি এটা বলছিল পরে করোনা ভাইরাস আয়া পড়লো না তারপরে উনি আর যায় পারে নাই যে নাকি নিচে আর কি উনি আর যায় পারে না উনি এখনো দেশে আটকাই গেছে পরে আমি তো মনে করেন যে এখানে গিয়ে আটকে গেছি পরে আমার রুমমেট আসলো রাজমিস্ত্রি তারা মনে করেন যে কাজ দিছে আপনার বলছে যে আপনি তো রুমেই থাকেন আর এখন কি করবেন আপনার আইডি নাই পরে কষ্ট করে মনে করেন যে একলগে রাজমিস্ত্রির কাজ করতাম হয় 6 দিন 7 দিনের ভিতরে মনে করেন যে 3 দিন কাজ করতাম কাজ পাইতাম কোনোদিন পাইতাম না এরকম মনে করেন যে মানে খাওন আর রুমের খরচটা পড়তাম
Eventually he did find legitimate work, but not for long.
বানানোর পর মনে করেন যে এই কোম্পানিতে ঢুকছি তালাবাদ কোম্পানি আছে না ডেলিভারি ওই তালাবাদ কোম্পানিতে ঢুকানোর পর মনে করেন যে মানে 25 দিনের মাথায় আপনার গ্যাস ফিটিংটা করছি পরে পাও 2 টুকরা হলো পরে 15 দিন পর দেশে চলে গেছে অ্যাপসিটিং এ
Unable to work, Akash returned to Bangladesh at the end of 2020. His leg snapped in two. But some alarming figures suggest that as a worker in Qatar, things could have been a lot worse.
One of the major controversies surrounding Qatar's use of migrants to build the World Cup has been the number of deaths. Earlier this year, The Guardian calculated the number of fatalities among migrant workers in Qatar as over 6,500 since it was awarded the tournament in 2010.
The data comes from just a handful of the countries of origin for workers in Qatar. It doesn't include some of the major contributing nations like the Philippines and Kenya. We also don't know what projects those people were working on when they died. But it's a fairly safe bet that a lot of them would not have been in the country had it not won the right to host the World Cup.
The Qatari government didn't respond to my request for an interview, but it's previously said, unfortunately, of the millions of residents from India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh and Nepal who've lived in Qatar from 2011 to 2019, a very small percentage have sadly passed away. Although each loss of life is upsetting, the mortality rate among these communities is within the expected range for the size and demographics of the population. 37 deaths have been reported among migrant workers working on Qatar's new stadiums for the World Cup. Not all of them can be explained by demographics.
From the 37 on the stadiums, 34 are claimed to be non-work related. So these are made up of heart attacks, illness, and 10 of those 34 are suicide. 10 suicide.
FIFA says the frequency of deaths on World Cup construction sites is actually lower than for comparable building projects. If that's true, and it's hard to prove whether it is or it isn't, does that make it okay?
In the construction industry, it has been for years, for decades, that we have tried to say, well, this proportion of fatalities is just normal. We have to teach a lot and to tell in public that it's not normal. If you compare construction industry to the chemical industry says, well, the goal is 0 fatalities.
The Qatari government says since 2010 there has been a consistent decline in the mortality rate as a result of the health and safety reforms we've introduced. We expect this downward trend to continue in the future.
But the deaths, combined with the treatment of workers since 2010, have been enough to encourage some stakeholders to decide they want nothing to do with Qatar's World Cup.
Earlier this year, I reported on DW on one supplier of turf to past World Cups deciding not to bid this time round because of the conditions it had seen in Qatar. Players too have been taking a stand, with both the German and Norwegian national teams openly protesting the situation in Qatar.
There are even calls for an all-round boycott of the 2022 World Cup. Those calls are probably loudest in Norway, where there's a campaign to encourage the Football Association not to send a team if they qualify.
We as supporters are now working actively to encourage local clubs to take a stand in the matter and participate in this democratic decision. FIFA should take a much more clear responsibility. At least people shouldn't die as a direct consequence of us playing football.
FIFA disagrees that it's dropped the ball on human rights.
We put it as a condition in our bidding processes for all our competitions, and wherever we go around the world, we are, of course, highlighting the need for protecting human rights.
Calls for a boycott of the Qatar World Cup haven't really spread much beyond Northern Europe, and they're unlikely to result in the tournament being moved. And anyway, not everyone agrees that it's the way to bring about change.
I think what needs to happen is a concerted media campaign to ensure that the lives of these people aren't forgotten during the World Cup, that actually that they are remembered through that World Cup, and then a campaign that ensures that this never happens again.
As for workers' rights, campaigners admit that Qatar has made moves in the right direction, but there's still a long way to go.
While there has been progress, we continue to call on Qatar and FIFA, which also has responsibilities under international standards, to push to ensure that these reforms are implemented, are enforced, and really that the World Cup leaves a positive legacy that these bodies say they want it to.
Every year, Qatar holds a football tournament for its army of labourers from overseas. As it prepares for the ultimate soccer spectacle at the end of 2022, the world is watching closely. The treatment of migrant workers in Qatar could still tarnish the name of the beautiful game.
And that's all from this edition of DW Business Beyond. If you've enjoyed it, give it a like and do subscribe to our channel. Until next time, take care.